My name is John Yap with the City of Iowa City. I am pleased to introduce the firm Opticos tonight, represented by Dan Perolik and John Meeke. Opticos is an architecture, planning, and design firm hired by the City of Iowa City to conduct an analysis of the Northside Neighborhood and the South District Neighborhood. The Northside Neighborhood meeting was last night. The South District meeting is tonight, and thanks again for coming. Opticos has extensive experience in updating development codes and implementing form-based codes, which they will discuss and describe more for you tonight. They also specialize in designing for missing middle housing, which is defined as the type of housing in between a single-family residence and a large apartment building. So duplexes, townhouses, fourplexes, that type of housing. Tonight, our main focus is the South District, particularly the undeveloped areas, such as around Alexander School, as well as the transition areas at the edges of the existing neighborhoods, transitioning to the new neighborhoods, which will, over time, build up in the South District. With that, I'll turn it over to John Meeke. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Again, thank you for everyone coming out and spending some time with us tonight. We're really excited to be here. We had some great turnout yesterday in the North Side. We have been doing stakeholder meetings this past 2 days, and so we have met with some of you in individual meetings, but we appreciate you all coming tonight. A little bit of overview of the presentation. I'm going to give an introduction. We're going to ask you, you should have a flyer in your hands with some photographs. We're just going to ask you to give some initial impressions on up or down votes on the buildings that are shown. I'll get into the heart of the presentation that talks a lot about walkability, and then Dan will present some more technical slides about missing middle and form-based codes. Then we'll get to working on the maps that are at your tables, and we'll spend about 25, 30 minutes at the maps. We'd like you all to have a discussion. And then we'll have you each nominate one person to just give kind of the top things you as a group discussed and present that to the entire group. And then we'll talk a little bit about the next steps, about what we'll be doing over the next 6 months to 9 months with you all as a community. So today and this week is all about us trying to understand Iowa City, understand the issues going on in the North Side, understand the issues going on in the South District. So again, as I mentioned, we had stakeholder meetings where we're just really listening, trying to understand what's going on. And that's what yesterday night and tonight is about as well. Again, asking the larger community to help us understand what's going on. We'll have 2 additional trips after this where we'll get a chance to come back and present what we heard from everyone, what we've started to understand from our own analysis, and start to present some tools that might help you all reach the vision and ideas that you all have set forth in the South District Plan and that you tell us tonight. And then really the last step of this project is coming up with a recommendation report that just lists those tools, the things that the city should explore in kind of next steps and in the future. So we are looking in the South District very much so in the areas shown in red here about potential new growth and how we can connect. We love the fact that you as a community have a great amount of open space that's already been assigned here, whether it's Weatherby Park or the soccer fields or the new, and I'm Terry True Blood Lake or Park? Park. But you know, that's one thing, to have parks, but the other thing that we really love is that you already have a trail network that's been put in, and you have a greenway network that's been put in before the development has happened, right? So you've already thought about this. We often go to many communities where we're trying to piecemeal together trail systems or greenway systems or even park networks. So we think you all as a community have already done a lot of great work. And then the beautiful work that you've done just here on Sycamore with the new roundabouts and the sidewalks and the 8-foot multi-use trail. So again, we are building off of the South District plan that you all have. This is not an effort to rethink this. We're simply here to help you think about how to implement that plan, right? And so these are just the cover of the South District Plan for those who may not have seen it, and then just some concept drawings that were in the actual document that talk about some of the aspirations for the South District. I'm going to ask you all if you could take a second and just take the flyer with the photos on both sides, and just quick impressions on what you're seeing in the buildings there, whether you like it or not. If you get a chance, you can write some notes below it, just about why maybe you voted one way or another. And this is not meant to be like up vote, down vote on what shows up in the South District. It's more about just letting you look at a few things before Dan talks in more detail about missing middle. He'll explain some of these buildings that you see in these photographs. So if you could spend about 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and just take a pass at that. So what we wanted to talk about was walkable cities today are really becoming thriving places. And it's really evident in the north side. We've heard that there's really been kind of a rebound, or I think there's always been a lot of investment in the north side, but we've heard that even in the north side there's been some rebound. And we recognize that in the South District Plan there was a discussion about wanting to be a more walkable place. And all the studies are showing that these are the places where people want to live, places where they have choices, right? They can walk to the school, like this school that you have here. They can walk to a grocery store. They can walk to visit a neighbor, but they can also drive, or they can ride a bicycle, and they have opportunities to do all those things. And I think one of the most important things is make sure you have connected streets. And when we talked to the north side, we talked about you have an incredibly well-connected network of streets and alleys. And in the South District, it's a little more variable. You have some neighborhoods that are really well connected both inside the neighborhood and to the adjacent streets. And you have some neighborhoods where it's really limited to getting into the neighborhood and even within the neighborhood in terms of its level of connectivity. And the importance here is a diagram here that actually, I should mention, apologies, we have one other consultant on the team who could not make it. He was snowed in New England, and he will be joining us on future trips, Rick Chelman. And he actually helped draw these diagrams and influence these diagrams. But what they're showing here is on the top of the drawings here is, kind of your typical way things get built, where you have a commercial mall by itself, you have your multifamily apartments, your single-family houses, and you might have a school. And they're all distinct and separated. And then on the bottom side is just more the traditional way in which cities grew up. There was a network of streets that were interconnected, their uses were mixed. And what we often talk about when we show this is, when you live in this house and you want to get to the mall, you have to go out of your neighborhood and get back out on that big arterial and then go to the mall. Or if you live in this apartment building and you want to visit this house, you have to get back out on that arterial. And that causes problems both for traffic on those larger arterials. Maybe when the development's first built, not so bad, right? Because there aren't that many people living in the area, not that many people needing to use the arterials. But over time, traffic along this arterial grows and grows and grows. Whereas in the traditional pattern, you can do all of those trips still, but you don't have to get out here on the arterials. And we think this is important for the South District. We know in the South District Plan it talks a lot about walkability, but an important component of that is having connectivity. It's not always just done with streets, so you already have a great trail network. We understand there's a bicycle master plan that's just begun, where there may be additional trail networks identified and added. That will be one of the things that we ask you to mark on the map. So all these things I talk about, as you're drawing on the maps and noting it, think about these things as you're doing that. So where are there additional street connections, trail connections, sidewalks that are needed in your community, really to support the fact that you can get around in a car, you can get around on transit, you can get around walking, or you can get around safely bicycling. We'll talk a little bit about, as we talk about streets, is what makes streets really livable, form a community. It's really about when you have commercial areas, and we know in the South District Plan, it talked about having some neighbor commercial. What is the form of that commercial? Streets where you have shop fronts, the ability to have outdoor seating when the weather's nice. We recognize that This trip, you guys were kind enough to give us some nice warm weather and sunny while it's a little cold, no snow, but that you can have that active retail at the ground floor. Street trees, we're really excited to see the trees that have been planted along the new section of Sycamore. I'm looking forward to come back to your community in 10 or 15 years and see those trees grown and starting to fill in a canopy across that street. On-street parking, narrow travel lanes, just thinking about all these little details that help create a space that's welcoming. And here's an example of a wonderful building that contributes to the street from here in Iowa City, and a photograph that's not from Iowa City where blank walls really don't contribute. They kind of deaden the space. Talking about, again, complete streets, thinking about all users, whether they're people walking around, young or old, children trying to get to this school, grandparents trying to come see their kids play at this school, bicyclists, transit, and cars. And again, as I mentioned before, we're really excited to see the amount of forethought that's gone into the South District to put in the trails, to put in the sidewalks along Sycamore before all the development has arrived. We think that's, you guys are already a big step forward. Community gathering spaces. You have lots of parks, right? So as I mentioned before, True Blood Park. We have I've been mispronouncing this. Weatherby. It is. There is an R there. Weatherby Park. You have a whole series of parks, right? You have big parks. You have great amenities. Some of them maybe need a little better access. That's one of the other things we'd like you to mark on the maps is how to get better access. But also recognizing that like your commercial streets, so like your pedestrian mall in downtown, little pocket parks, even little corners can be places that form other gathering spaces. They're less formal or less structured than a park that you might have. Again, your trails and paths that are really, really quite wonderful. We are looking forward to coming back in late April, early May, and riding bikes and being able to ride around the South District. The same concept, though, applies to residential streets. Thinking about how do buildings face the streets, that you have nice sidewalks, you have a tree canopy in the summer when it's hot that provides shade. We're showing here two of the Northside streets. This is not from Iowa City. But again, just having porches, stoops, street trees, on-street parking, things to think about. And your South District Plan was thinking about those things. And what we want to do is hear from you tonight, any additional information, so that as we come back over the next few trips, we can continue to think about what other tools would be helpful for you as a community to implement this plan. Wanted to mention that one of the things that's talked about in South District is diversity of housing types, and Dan will talk about that a little bit more. The other thing we want you to think about, though, is what does commercial mean for you all? So in the South District Plan, it asks for, we would like some neighborhood commercial. We had an opportunity to work in another community where they had that same question, and they asked for neighborhood commercial. And the city tried to respond, and this is what they got. They got a gas station. This is a fast food. This is a little shop center behind. And the neighbors were like, well, yeah, that's commercial, but that's not really what we were thinking about, right? It's not really neighborly. It's not really something we would walk to. You can definitely drive to these. And so we helped them think about, well, what could we do differently, right? If we could turn the clock back a little bit. And the idea that, you might have some residential next door, but that maybe we can create a space around a small plaza where we could have a little commercial building with some residents above. Maybe they could be live-work units. We have parking in the back. But just the idea that how do we create a space that's inviting for people to get there both by car, but also on foot and by bicycle. This is a neighborhood that if they had been thinking about things the way that you all have been thinking about the South District, if they've been thinking about that 10 years ago, they could have solved some of the issues. So they are same kind of problems. They have a lot of low wetlands. There's a school about 4 blocks down the road from here. They forgot that students might want to walk to that school, so there were no sidewalks. There are no sidewalks on this street here. It goes down to the elementary school. So just thinking about these things as you're working on the maps, about where you might want some neighborhood serving retail, and what it might look like. With that, I'm going to hand it over, the presentation over to Daniel Perlich, and he's going to talk a little bit about some more technical details.
Good evening. So I'm going to talk with you about two things. I'm going to talk about a concept of missing middle housing, and I'll explain to you what exactly that means, and then also form-based coding, and that's even a little bit more technical, so I'll walk you through that. But really, in terms of missing middle housing, it's really about kind of thinking outside the box a little bit and being creative about the types of housing choices and diverse housing choices that the city and the community and developers need to be sort of delivering to the Iowa City buyers. And I like to start with just a few of these statistics to kind of ground the conversation. And this was a study I recently found on Realtor.com. It's kind of one of the most well-known resources for real estate in the country. But it basically is looking at the two biggest sort of groups of potential, whoops. Just do. It's actually a touch screen. I didn't actually know it was good. So the millennials, who are people ages 25 to 34, and I see a sort of good group of those folks here tonight, and then the baby boomers, who are the aged 55 to 64, and so that's a big chunk of the population, right? If you look at these two sectors, that almost over 50%, I think it's close to 60% of millennials want to live in what we classify as missing middle housing. It's non-single family detached, it's townhouses, it's live-work units, it's more creative choices. And the baby boomers, sort of a third of them want to live in something other than a single family detached house or a conventional garden apartment. So if you put those two sort of market demands or sort of amount of people that want to live in something different together, it's a really large part of the group of people that are looking for more creative housing choices. And this is pretty interesting as well. So this one always shocks me. 30% of all households, sort of, and this is all across the country, are single person households, which means there's only one person sort of in that household. And you can imagine what that does in terms of influencing the type of housing that we need to be delivering to the market today. Because we've done a really great job of building housing for, that Leave It to Beaver, sort of quintessential mom and dad, 4.5 kids market. And what we're seeing now is, just as a starting point, a third of all households are very, very different. And so thinking about how that impacts the type of housing that we're delivering. And the next one is by 2025, up to 85% of all households will not have children. So think about that and think about the impact that has on the types of housing that we need to be delivering. So these are huge, huge shifts that are happening in terms of household demographics and how they relate to market demand. All right, and then for those baby boomers out there, right, and it's 10,000 people a day turn 66 years old, right? So part of this gets back to the type of housing that they want to live in, but a big part of this also gets back to that walkable neighborhood concept, in that a lot of the boomers want to live in a walkable neighborhood, and a lot of them actually need, and more of them actually need to live in a walkable neighborhood so they don't have to try to drive a car or rely on sort of getting around. They can sort of walk down the street and get to some of their amenities. And so, right, these numbers are pretty shocking. And that's why I like to kind of start to sort of kind of put a sort of the foundation in place for discussing why we need to think a little bit more creatively about housing. And so we came up with this concept in our office of missing middle housing, and this is the diagram that we created. On this your left-hand side of this diagram are single-family detached houses, right? And we've done a really good job of planning for, over the past 50 or 60 years, zoning for, and sort of builders and developers of actually delivering single-family detached houses, right? We've figured that out. On the right-hand side of this, in the white, are the 3, 4, 5-story either residential or mixed-use buildings with ground floor commercial. And what we've seen is over the course of the last sort of 12 to 15 years, cities have figured that how to deliver it in terms of zoning, and builders have figured that out as well. And you can see that in your downtown area. There's a lot of that scale of building. Now, it's all of these housing types in between. It's the duplex, it's a fourplex, it's what we call a mansion apartment that might have 6 to 8 units in it. It's a cottage court or a bungalow court type that we call them missing because we really haven't been building very many of these at all over the past 50 to 60 years. And there's a lot of different reasons for it, and one of them is actually zoning. But the idea is that if you take one thing away, a concept away about missing middle from this presentation tonight, is that these housing types never get bigger than the scale of a house. They just happen to have multiple units in that. And you'll see from the photographs I'm about to show you some good examples, right? You have some historic examples. From what I understand is this might have actually been like a saloon at some time or another when it was at a dirt crossroads. But this is what we call a side-by-side duplex. It has one unit on one side and another unit attached to it on the other side, right? Scale of a house, just happens to have multiple units in it. This is one of my favorites. It's called a stacked duplex. And so you go in the door on the left, you go up a flight of stairs, and you live basically one unit on the whole upper floor. If you go in the door on the right, that is the entry to the ground floor unit. And this is a duplex that is actually sitting on a street that is mostly single-family homes. But it fits in very nicely because it's actually the scale of a house. And unless you're actually walking by this and looking really closely, you would never notice that this is not a single-family detached house. So it's kind of, they behave very much like a house, and they're the scale of a house, right? Another example of the side-by-side duplex, right? This isn't about an architectural style. This is simply about the scale, form of a building, and as John was saying, is how the buildings define and activate the street edge. A carriage house, right? We've seen some of these. You've got a lot of alleys in your historic sort of downtown neighborhoods. Some of the newer projects actually have alleys as well and sort of do these carriage houses. Just an important part of sort of providing housing choice, right? It can provide a really nice rental unit and sort of generate some revenue for the person who owns the house in front. Or if your kids moved away and went to college and they want to move back home and you don't really want to put up with them on a day-to-day basis, you can stick them back in the carriage house. Or, if the carriage house, instead of being on top of the garage, was next to the garage, maybe your parents can move into that sort of, sometimes we call it a granny flat, right? They move into that small unit behind your house as they age and need more care and more attention. Then there's the fourplex. And what this is it's 2 units on the ground floor, one on the left, one on the right. And you go up a flight of stairs, and there's 2 units above each of those. So 2 units on the ground floor, just 2 above. It's a really simple model, but right, once again, scale of a house just happens to have 4 units in it. It's just really, really, we like this concept because instead of using terms that us planners and architects and even developers like to use that tend to scare people a little bit, like multifamily or medium density or high density, let's just start talking about scale, quality, and sort of that neighborhood that these plug into. This is we call it a multiplex small. This is 3 units in a building that looks like a house, right? This really, you would never notice unless you really stopped to look really closely at that this was not a single family detached house. And then the townhouse. I think this is a pretty straightforward type. I like to use this example because once again, this isn't about style. It can be eclectic. It can tie into the regional vernacular. It can be something a little bit more contemporary that maybe a certain percentage of the market may be interested in buying. And then a live-work unit. I'm going to talk a little bit more about an application here, but this is basically a ground floor flex space and then a 2-story townhouse above it. And developers like this because it's sold to one buyer. It's what they call fee simple. So it's on a 25 by 85 to 100 foot deep lot. And the owner of this building can either incubate their own little business out of that ground floor space. They could use it as their artist studio. They could rent it to somebody else that wants to use that space. It could be an architect's office, it could be an attorney's office, it could be an artist that's selling their paintings and sort of doing the paintings or whatever art they want to do in the back. But this is actually a really great way to incubate a small neighborhood center like John showed in the illustration earlier. Really good type for doing that. And then there's the cottage court. This is a company called The Cottage Company. If you haven't actually seen their work, they're based in the Seattle region, but they do really great work. They've created these, over the past 20 years, a number of these great neighborhoods of small, like 700 square foot, really high quality cottages oriented around a green space. And it creates a really strong sense of community within that shared green space. And a lot of times they actually have a community building with like a shared, you can rent the space for parties, or you can sort of have dinner with your neighbors at certain points of the week. But it's just a really, really neat type. And then a more historic example of this is actually from Omaha, Nebraska. It's a neighborhood that I lived in for a little while. It's just a different variation of it, right? There are sort of different ways you can achieve kind of similar results. Shared green space, cute little one-story, 700 square foot, one-bedroom units that create a great sense of community. Okay, now for form-based codes. And so for a non-technical sort of beginning of this description is, so zoning, this form-based coding is a type of zoning, and what zoning is zoning are the rules by which you can develop. It tells you how tall a building can be, tells you what types of uses you can use on your property. It tells you what number of units you can have on a piece of property. So what a form-based code is, it's just simply a different way of looking at how we write the rules by which development happens under. And so I like to use the Polaroid of the picture of the Polaroid camera, and especially at this point in the presentation where people are getting a little sleepy, and so it might wake them like, why is this guy showing a Polaroid camera in his presentation? So how many of you, if you're gonna email or Instagram or text a photo to somebody, how many of you would use a Polaroid camera? So, right, you could do it. You could take the picture, you'd have to scan it, you could take it into a program and adjust the photos, and then, you could do it, but it's not the right tool. In the same way, we feel very strongly that the way that the rules for development have been written, the zoning, over the past, it's now 100 years old, is really out of date. And what a form-based code is really a new way of looking at how we write the rules under which development occurs. And so we see this as the form-based code. So the old existing zoning was the Polaroid, and it's trying to deliver, it was set up to deliver suburban areas like housing over here, commercial over here, like the diagram John showed you. But the form-based code is the new system for delivering walkable neighborhoods more effectively. So what we'll, as we come and meet with you over the course of this project, at the most basic level, instead of starting the conversation in the rules and talking about uses like residential, single-family residential, multifamily, commercial, industrial, we're probably going to talk more in the sense of what is the appropriate scale? Is the appropriate scale small? Is it medium? Or is it a large? And if you sort of, in likelihood in a neighborhood like this South Side plan, is you're probably going to have, small and medium and slightly bigger than medium. And what is the right mix of those scales to create a neighborhood and create a walkable neighborhood in particular? And so, how many of you have ever picked up a zoning code? So I encourage you, just because you're here and you're engaged, just go online and just Google Iowa City zoning code and see what comes up. It will not look like this. What you'll find is page after page of sort of very technical planning and legal jargon. What we tend to do is translate those set of rules into a much easier to understand graphic system. So has a lot of graphics, and it distills a lot of that text down into very simple tables that then tie back to those graphics. So it's highly usable. It's much clearer than a typical way of doing zoning. And we like to talk about predictability. It's predictable both for a community like you all that come out and participate in a process and sort of help write those rules. And it's also predictable for the developer who comes in and says, I want to deliver that vision. And if they come in and to deliver that vision, there's sort of a really clear, predictable path from A to Z for that developer. And so it's a really important part of this concept. And we're gonna, these are kind of, we'll be introducing some new terminology or concepts. And I just wanted to give an example of them. We call them frontages, frontage types. And what this is, and it's a really important part of creating a walkable, high quality walkable place, it's how the building interfaces with the street or the sidewalk. And I think this picture kind of tells it all, because most zoning codes in sort of that Polaroid system, they don't recognize the difference between this small multi-unit building and this small multi-unit building, because the height is the same, the setbacks are the same, right? The front setback and the side setbacks, and the density, which is you calculate the number of dwelling units per acre, is the same in this building and this building. But what's different about it? Anybody? Yeah, fenestration, the way that it sort of acknowledges the street or doesn't, right? And so when we're writing a form-based code, we actually make sure that in addition to heights and densities and setbacks, that interface with the street looks more like this. It doesn't have to look exactly like that, but it achieves that same intent in a better way than a building like this does. And so we think about that very carefully as we're thinking about the neighborhoods, right? This is another example. And this is a neighborhood main street. Like you can imagine being in the Northside Market area, right? Near like the Bluebird or the old brewery building. And somebody builds a brand new building. This is actually a new building, not 5 years old. And as a pedestrian, you're wanting to walk down that street to do some shopping. Do you think that this sidewalk condition encourages window shopping? So what's missing from that building that discourages windows? And it's just really shocking that the most basic things that create a really high quality place, if you don't actually ask for them, they won't, a lot of times they'll sort of be missed. And so that's why we need to pay attention to these details. The other thing that's really odd about this is, right, you can't walk side by side with somebody down this sidewalk, and you definitely can't get a wheelchair in this. You can't really even walk comfortably through there. So those details do matter. And so the form-based code really focuses on those elements that make a high quality walkable place. And we also, as John mentioned, we're going to be thinking about street design really closely with Rick Chelman, who's our other consultant. And so what you'll see as we make our way through this process is the details do matter when it comes to street design. And what's really interesting is that there have been studies done that show at 25 miles per hour, if a pedestrian gets hit by a car, I think there's about a 10 to 15% chance that the pedestrian is going to die. So there's a pretty good chance that the pedestrian will survive. But if you simply go up to 35 miles per hour, that there's an 85% chance that the pedestrian is going to die when it's hit by a car. So the details of the street that basically encourage the driver to drive at 25 in a neighborhood as opposed to 35 are really important. And so those are the details that we will focus on. So as we think about how you put the missing middle together to create neighborhoods and sort of use a new set of rules in the form-based coding to make that happen, these are some of the different ways we might consider mixing some single-family detached houses with a duplex, with the fourplex. Historically, what happened is, right, the creamy yellow types are the missing middle ones. And, one way to do this might be to sprinkle types throughout a block where there's just 15 or 20% of the types are sprinkled throughout the block. And that's possible because they're all the scale of the house. And so they are very compatible with one another. Another way to think about this, and this may be a little bit easier thing to deliver in a new neighborhood, is, you still have a core of the white here, which are the single-family, small lot, detached housing, but you pick a street that goes through the neighborhood where you actually have that entire street front be a mix of these missing middle housing types. And so across the street, you would have the same. So we like the rule of like faces like. So all the little missing middle housing types sort of define and activate that street. So that's another way to do it. And a couple other ways is maybe there's some slightly higher intensity buildings along one of the streets, and then you turn the corner into a neighborhood, and you might use the missing middle types like a fourplex or even a duplex to transition down in scale from the larger apartment buildings down into what might be more of that single-family detached home scale. And if you think about either an existing neighborhood main street or trying to create a new one in a neighborhood like this, these types, once again, provide a really great transition from that active ground floor commercial use, a very different sort of form around a corner into the neighborhood. So it's just these are some different ways that we can be thinking about application of these types. Then we write a set of rules in the form-based code that say, we usually call a zone neighborhood main street. So you have a set of rules for this area in the plan that says the building must address the street. It can be 3 stories. The ground floor has to be active commercial. The upper floor can be open. It can be commercial. It can be residential. It can be a mix of those. And then we might have a zone here that says, what's called missing middle or walkable neighborhood or mixed housing types, and it encourages the mix of missing middle. And then we still might have another walkable zone that maybe leans more toward on the side of single-family detached of a range of sizes. So just wanted to give you a really quick example. We're doing this project just outside of Omaha, Nebraska, just to give you a sense of how these concepts could be applied and are being applied. But this is a 60-acre parcel. The developer wants to create a complete new neighborhood, and this project is actually 100% missing middle types, which is a little bit different than what we're talking about here. But the core of this is, and the starting point is creating a neighborhood main street right here at the intersection where 2 of the sort of major streets actually come together. And so it looks and feels like this. And it utilizes that live-work type that I talked about. And even if you just have 3 or 4 of these on each side of the street, you're defining sort of a gateway into the neighborhood and a place where people want to go grab a coffee and meet up with their friend and take their laptop and go get some work done during the day. So it's a really sort of easy way to incubate that seed of the walkability, right? And this is a street of mansion apartments, right? You might not even know if you're driving down this lakeside drive that these are not single-family estates. And this was actually our client sort of really loved the turn-of-the-century estates in some of the Omaha neighborhoods and said, let's take that exact form and scale, let's just make it multiple units. And so each of those buildings has 7 units in it. So we call that a mansion apartment, right? And it's once again, it's about building up this neighborhood. Just some other examples. High quality public spaces are really important for this. They may tie into the greenway. They may sort of create a more continuous greenway through the project and tying it across to the different park systems. Really, these are actually ground floor flats over 2-story townhouses, another interesting type. And then this is just a typical street, right? The street is really important, and that's why we show it in the drawing, but it's a tree-lined street. And this street, in this particular street, it's a series of 4plexes and 6plexes that once again kind of look, feel, and behave much like a single-family house. They just happen to have multiple units in it. So those are just some of the general concepts and some ways that as we move forward with this particular project that you can begin to think about and see how we might apply the missing middle housing types and thinking about application of a new set of rules in the form-based coding to achieve these types of conditions and quality of places in the new neighborhoods here.